This is Tao Unbound, the English language podcast of Tel Aviv University. Please welcome your host, Ido Aharoni, Tel Aviv University's graduate, member of the Board of Governors, lecturer, writer, and veteran diplomat.
Welcome to yet another episode of Tao Unbound from our studio at Tel Aviv University. I'm Ido Aharoni, your host, and today it is my great honor and privilege to host Professor Nachum Dershowitz. It's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to our studio.
Pleasure to be here.
So Professor Dershowitz is a Professor Emeritus of Computer Science. He's an Israeli computer scientist. He's known for the Dershowitz Manna ordering. We'll talk all about that. We'll ask him what does it mean. And he has such an elaborate career. I won't be able to cover all of it. Let me just say that he started his career in computer science in 1975 at Bar Ilan University. Then he had a degree from Weizmann Institute of Science. He then spent time at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, then Tel Aviv U, Weizmann Institute. Has been affiliated with universities all over the world, from Paris to Chicago to Shanghai to Beijing, Stanford, and so on and so forth. Wow, what an incredible biography you have. Such an honor to have you in our studio.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, before we jump into the subject matter, and I will go over your areas of research, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you discover that this is your passion?
So I grew up in the United States, and both my parents are academics, and when I was in high school, my father was a professor of education at Long Island University in New York. And someone there got a grant, I think it was from the National Science Foundation, to try to teach high school kids to program. We're talking now 1966.
Oh, that was the time, I believe, that one of the greatest Jewish basketball players played for Long Island University.
Really?
Yeah, Barry Leibowitz, who came to Israel and played here in Hapoel Tel Aviv. But did you ever hear the name, Barry Leibowitz?
No.
I think he's one of the greatest. He's right up there
so.
with the greatest Jewish basketball players.
So Tal Brody I did know about because he was a neighbor of my parents.
Tal Brody was
Tal
Brody was from Trenton, New Jersey, and Tal finished the University of Illinois in 65, and I think that Barry is probably a couple of years younger than Tal Brody. I think maybe 2 years younger.
Okay. Not my forte, but
so Long Island University, 1966. Your father is doing work there,
and they have a summer program to try to teach high school kids like me to program in the programming language called Fortran. And they had a nice summer program, spend half the day programming, half the day in the swimming pool and the like. And there was a group of high school boys and girls who literally learned how to program on these large computers with punch cards, and where you'd write a key in your program and a kind of typewriter, and then the computer would translate it, and you'd run your little program like to play tic-tac-toe. This is what we did that summer, and that's my first exposure to computer programming and computer science, and that sort of got me interested in what was obviously a new field. I was in the middle of high school. Then after high school, I came to Israel, and there was just starting a college called the Jerusalem College of Technology, or today it's called Machon Lev, usually, in which the idea was to combine Jewish studies with sciences. And they are starting a program in computer science, and I was interested both in Jewish studies from childhood.
When you moved from the States to Israel, did you move alone or with your family?
Not the same day, but the same time. Yes, my family. I was post high school, so and my parents were intending to make Aliyah. Well, since they got married, but they had plans for '67, but the war broke out, and so we only came to visit that year, and then I was exposed actually to I went to the museum and saw the Dead Sea Scrolls and things. So that's a part of this picture. But then in '69, they both came to be to teach at Bar-Ilan University, and I came along, but I was not living at home anymore for the most part. So I went to this college where we spent half a day in Jewish studies, and that always interested me. I was an avid reader, and I took computer science, and from there to Bar-Ilan and to Weizmann. And
I'm familiar with the work of Machon Lev, and I remember my introduction to their work was as early as the early 1990s. So you're telling me that they've been around since the 60s, which I wasn't aware of.
I was in the first.
And they're doing great
69.
work. They're doing great work until this very day. So that sparked your interest. And now learning computer language back in the day, it's like, what was the main skill that was required?
Attention to detail. A kind of, it's not the language itself. It's translating a problem into a formal, detailed way, what we call an algorithm, to solve it, to step by step. And a good example is when we're taught long division. And you have to step by step, and we're not exactly taught rules we're sort of given a vague thing, and then by practicing we get the idea, and we learn how to do it. And then now, once you learn it, you know how to divide. So here it's taking any problem like that and formulating a precise sequence of steps. That's the main issue in programming. And whether it's in one language or another is not so crucial.
Now, I have here a very impressive list of your areas of research. And if you don't mind, I know that you would like to speak specifically about one particular project that you did, which has huge implications to our tradition and our history, the Genizah Kahir project, which we will talk about. But before that, I wanted to just mention to our audience, look at what this person researched in his life: theoretical computing, artificial intelligence, which is the hot button issue today, programming languages, software engineering, and computational humanities. Now, of all those 5 areas, the one that caught my attention is your expertise in understanding artificial intelligence, which is another way of using the term machine learning. Am I correct? Teaching machine how to...
then they overlap.
They overlap. Okay. So, now, do you understand the public fear when it comes to AI? People are scared.
No, definitely, because the jobs that will be available for humans as opposed to machines will change. I mean, it has been changing. It has been changing in the industrial era.
Since the introduction of automation.
But there'll be, I expect, major changes ahead of us.
On a different scale.
Completely. Robots, for example. So there are industrial robots today that take over, maybe car assembly lines and things, but there will be a lot more of that. And there'll be household robots soon. And Israelis are developing robots, as are many other countries, and both doing research and development. So I started graduate school at Weizmann, and my first was one advisor, but then under Zohar Manna, whose name you mentioned, the late Zohar Manna, and he was offered a job at Stanford, and I was his graduate student, and he said, come with me to Stanford. It is paradise on earth, Palo Alto and so on, and you'll continue your graduate studies there with me. And there I was at the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, where he was situated, and that's the lab that I joined. It was a beautiful place out in the mountains behind Stanford on the other side of the accelerator. And I guess my girlfriend and I quickly got married, so we moved to California. And in this AI lab, we're talking about 1975, 1972. And we got married. So I started my graduate studies, I think, in 1972, and this is 1975. After they had robots in the hallways. They had self-driving cars outside. We had computers playing games, creating three-dimensional music. We had chats. We had news feeds. A lot of the things that people today think, are very new, were already in the experimental stages down then. We had the first laser printers. We designed the first Hebrew fonts. A friend, mine, Ray Finkel, and myself. It was a very unusual atmosphere. There was several labs in the United States at the time. Stanford was one, MIT, and elsewhere where artificial intelligence was taking off. So Stanford was led by John McCarthy, who actually coined the term artificial intelligence. And there was a strong bent on logic, on teaching computers to reason. There were other things. So today, artificial intelligence has two sides. Either you have vision, which is something that we do unconsciously. We don't, we see something, we recognize it. And famously, Kahneman, in his book Fast and Slow and Fast Thinking, whichever way it is, the brain has different ways of doing things. So today's machine learning that you mentioned does the fast thinking mainly, so that the idea is anything that people can do without thinking, you can immediately respond in a second. That's something that some neural networks should be able to do. Now, there were neural networks back, in the 60s too. Just there wasn't the computer power and the size and the speed to achieve meaningful results. So in those days, computers were more successful at things like playing checkers because there was a reasoning, step-by-step kind of thing, as opposed to what we use today with neural networks and machine learning, which is the massive amount of data that went into training something that can respond immediately. So today and nowadays, there are researchers all over who are thinking hard about combining these two aspects of artificial intelligence: the quick thinking, the immediate response, or the fight or flight, decision that you don't have time to reason through, but you've been trained, and the better trained you are, the better your decision making, together with slow reasoning and thinking through, the planning, the step-by-step. And what makes someone an expert is when the step-by-step thinking becomes sort of automated in the person, that it becomes habitual or natural or immediate. And this is still an area of research. And so some, but again, the computers are getting faster, stronger. This will happen. And your question about whether, to what extent the same mechanisms will be able to do things better without making these ridiculous mistakes that chat engines do today, I'm sure that will happen.
So I'm less referring to mistakes, which people call in the professional jargons the hallucinations, AI hallucinations. I'm more interested in what you think from a computer engineering, computer science perspective about the fate of truth in the age of artificial intelligence. Because to me, one of the biggest challenges is authentication of sources, verification. Technology creates a challenge for us. We can tell now a world without a heavy reliance on truth is going to be a different world. It is already a different world. If the factual objective truth becomes only one alternative that you can choose from, question is whether the same technology that created the problem can also present the solution.
I think the technology has only magnified the problem. We always had propaganda. Just because something is in the Britannica doesn't mean that it's perfectly accurate.
Correct. The question is,
they came out with a new edition.
If you see a computational solution to that problem, that's my question.
I imagine a computational solution to that problem. Yes. I think that we will be better at assessing reliability in the near future. Many of the chat engines today double check. Okay, they're still not perfect but they do check their sources, and they can filter out imaginary sources. This is happening already. Whether the point is that these systems have learned from the information that's out there, and much of it is biased and false and imaginary, and people are not very good at distinguishing fact from fiction, and people have fallen prey to scams, all the time. So that's not much different. So I am in that aspect, relatively optimistic that the computer will learn to tread more carefully.
Now, before we jump into the Genizah, the Cairo project that you did, which I'm eager to hear about, just one general question on a philosophical level. What do you see are the main challenges of computer science, especially when we are on the verge of introducing unprecedented computational power?
We don't know enough about ethical decisions. That's an area that needs more work, more interest. I remember a few years ago I taught the first seminar here for computer science students on ethics, and they all said that they were all last third-year students who were working, had a day job, and they had never considered the implications and the consequences of what they were doing at work until they were faced with this course. We need to consider ethics, but we need to figure out how to formalize it. If you want to, today, so people are thinking about this. You have an autonomous car. It needs to make life and death decisions sometimes, or you have drones, or you have various other things today, and how to incorporate these ethical decisions, which sometimes are culturally dependent. Is it more important? Is the child more important, or the pregnant woman, or the old wise man? We need to think about it not just in the philosophy department, but also when we're developing new things. So that, I think, is a major challenge. What I said before about combining reasoning, the slow thinking with the fast thinking, I think is a challenge that in the near future needs to be addressed in various ways. We're building robots today. We will have household robots, I think, in my lifetime, but if not, then in my children's. So I'd like, we need a more active, you're saying people are afraid, but people need to take, you can't wait for legislation and so on to solve these issues and make these decisions. We don't want, I personally think that all these closed systems today you have a company develops something, say a car. I think that the logic or whatever it is that's controlling the car has to be open for examination. And if it's closed, or you have today systems that make recommendations to judges, where what's the reasoning going on in these so-called artificial intelligence systems is not open, obvious, accessible. That I think is completely wrong. We should not allow that.
So what you're saying is that more transparency leads to more trust, and trust is the issue of our time.
Yes, and let's anyone test it. If you make it, I don't think we should have a car on the road with its software not open for examination. And if we do open things for examination, then you can run simulations, you can try it out. What will it do, in circumstances that that the designers didn't take into consideration? And that's.
By the way, as Professor Emeritus, do you still teach?
I do not teach anymore, but I do have a research group, and
the research
active.
group is focusing on.
Okay, so you mentioned I have many interests. So my day job is what you mentioned: logic, computation, theory, things like that, which is where this ordering you mentioned comes from. Which we're talking about. It has to do with how do you demonstrate that computer programs will finish their job, and methods of measuring progress, and so it's used in programs that prove theorems, computers that prove mathematical things or check software. Or today there's a lot in hardware, checking the hardware that there are no bugs in the chips. Then I have various hobbies, so to speak. So I did a lot of work on calendar calculations, historical calendars. That's a whole different subject. But what I do mainly now is we received a large 10 million euro grant from the European Union to make the medieval manuscripts, Hebrew manuscripts, but not just Hebrew, anything in Hebrew characters, to make them accessible over the internet to the world, to search the contents, to analyze. So this is a program started 2 years ago, which unfortunately was not an easy time in Israel to start a research project. It's called a synergy project. So it's several groups around the world. There's a group in Paris headed by Daniel Stockel. There's Judith Oljovi, who is based in Oxford, and Avi Schmidman at Bar-Ilan University, and I are the principal investigators, and working together particularly with the National Library of Israel. So the National Library of Israel has been digitizing Hebrew manuscripts collections all over the world. This actually started in the days of Ben-Gurion when they microfilmed them, because Ben-Gurion had this vision that we should have these resources available, but they're doing it sort of over again. And so there are about 100,000 such manuscripts in libraries all over, and the library has a project called Ktiv, in which they are photographing all the manuscripts in color that they can, and making them accessible over the internet. The rights of access depend on the library, but you have to be in Jerusalem in the library to use it, or you can use it from any place over the internet. That depends. But they have these images. So we're talking about 100,000 manuscripts and millions of images. And what we want to do is first let the computer read it, what we call OCR. So what does the text say? And then make that searchable, and then analyze it linguistically, analyze it for content, figure out a large part of this project is this migration of ideas, the intellectual history. How did knowledge move through the Jewish world by means of these manuscripts and texts, and how they spread, how you have something that was maybe written in the Byzantine times in the Middle East, but then it spread to Africa, it spread to Europe. It's the texts, and to what extent do the texts change over time, or liturgy, and so a component of this project is the Cairo Genizah. So besides these 100,000 books that stretch until the printing press, there are also fragments that were found particularly in the Cairo Genizah. So a Genizah is like a repository for discarded religious texts that because the rabbis say don't destroy religious texts or things that have God's name in it yourself. They're usually buried or something like that, so that they disintegrate on their own, but you don't actively destroy it. So what happened here in the in the synagogue, the Ben Ezra synagogue in Old Cairo, is that they had a room for depositing these discarded prayer books or Bibles or other things. And for the most part, the room was never emptied for more than 1,000 years. So that there was a collection of manuscripts and also some printed books from later times, stretching back to the 9th century. And this room was visited, seen. It may have been mentioned earlier, but in the late 19th century, people actually started emptying it. So there was a fellow Sapir who came there and looked at it, and other people, and the people in the synagogue may have sold some books to dealers to raise money for the synagogue, perhaps, but through Moses Shapiro was one of the people who sold many of the Cairo manuscripts, but then it all came. The big push was when there were these two very highly educated women from England who were twins. And they were from rich families, and they knew many languages, and they're, as I said, highly educated, and they both got married, and both of their husbands died. They're both childless, and they traveled the world, and they did a lot. They found manuscripts of the Gospels and things. They went to Santa Caterina. They found many things that they did, but they also came back from one of their trips with some Hebrew pages that they had bought in the market in Cairo, something that they brought them back to Cambridge. So Agnes and our sister. And they had a friend at the university, a scholar, who they knew it was Hebrew, because as I said, they were highly educated in new languages, but they didn't know what this old text that they had purchased was, and so they brought it to this fellow Schechter, who immediately said, "This is important," and it turned out to be the lost Hebrew text of a book called Ecclesiasticus, which is Ben Sirah, which was only known in translation. Anyway, so he organized them the money and so on, and they went and they emptied out this room and brought most of it back to Cambridge, where half the things still are, and then he moved to New York. So what they emptied out of this room, some probably around 400,000 leaves, pages of material, but most of it was put there because these are discarded books, so they're falling apart. So you may have a few pages together, but most of it are loose pages and damaged pages, which is why they put them there. So this is a treasure trove of text, and it turned out that they didn't just put prayer books and Bibles in there, because for some reason they put basically anything with Hebrew writing on it. And there are thousands or tens of thousands of what we call documentary material, contracts, letters, inventories, correspondence between traders.
We can learn about Jewish life in general, not only about
not just Jewish life. Yes, so Goitin wrote like 4 volumes on the Mediterranean society, and there's a 5th one about the trade in the Mediterranean, the trade in the Indian Ocean, that you learn from these letters, because you have merchants who are writing notes that ended up there, because they would write them often in Judeo-Arabic, which is Arabic and Hebrew characters, and their letters ended up thrown into this room. So we've learned an enormous amount about the economy and the relations and how they ensured things.
And just so that our audience gets an idea, using computational powers, saving how many years of human effort?
That's
countless.
Yes, that's the goal. Because they're brilliant scholars. As someone who, I said this material is spread out over 70 collections or so, major libraries and private collections, and pages here, pages. Tel Aviv University has a handful of pages, but only a handful. And so a scholar may say, maybe sitting in New York and looking at the collection there and say, oh, this looks familiar to me. I remember when I was in Geneva a few years ago, I saw something similar. And they've done wonderful work of finding what we call joins. 2 pages that now aren't separated, but originally were part of the same, say, literary work. And what we want the computer to do is to help match things up. So there are many things. So a few weeks ago, we released this European project group released computer transcriptions of all the Genizah images that we have. So the Genizah fragments were photographed in the past 2 decades or so, thanks to the generosity of Albert Dove Friedberg, who's a Canadian businessman, philanthropist, who had this idea of digitizing the Genizah. This is separate from what the library was doing with books, and this is photographing the Genizah material. And this was part of a project that was led by the late Yaakov Shveka. And so they inventoried and they photographed and they found the cataloging information and references in the literature. And then Yaakov Shveka came to me and said, now that we have these images, what can AI do with them that we couldn't do before? Now, what computers are good at is looking at a lot of material, scanning a lot quickly, as opposed to the scholar who concentrates on his specialty and may look for all copies of a particular work. But here, so we trained computers using these kind of AI, machine learning, to first do basic things like measurements and what languages are written in. But and then we started working on these joints, have the computer pair up pages that have been separated, and we had successes with that a number of years ago. And this is work I did with a colleague here, Lior Wolf, but the machine learning that you've been talking about has made dramatic strides. And we have what we call today deep neural networks, with sort of many layers. The structure, the idea is to mimic the brain structure, and these new networks can do more. And we're actively working both on training the computer to read, training the computer to recognize handwriting, training the computer to understand the layout of a page. These are all active.
Amazing. By the way, another project that comes to mind, talking about repositories, our viewers may not know that, but when you go to the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, and you put in a note between the stones, people, after a while, they collect them. They put them in bags and they bury them. But it would be safe to assume that someone like you, the future Professor Dershowitz, maybe a couple of generations from now, will find it, or some archaeologists will find it, and will use AI to create a story, a narrative from those pieces of the puzzle. Because you talk about hundreds of millions of notes that were collected over the years.
So I'm a little wary of that because it's a kind of invasion of privacy.
But someone is going to do it.
Someone might do that. But you're right. But this but there are many other collections. There are papyrus fragments. There's the island Elephantine in the Nile near Aswan, where, again, in the late 19th century, the French and the Germans dug, and they found there had been a Jewish garrison from the Persian period, 2,500 years ago there. And there are documents, marriage contracts, and other things that were written on papyrus. And there's a famous Passover letter. But there are many fragments sitting in Europe, the little pieces of papyrus, square inch. And to piece those together again would be fascinating. There are many other places with the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I also worked with, where you have, like in Cave 4, thousands of little fragments.
Well, in the case of the Dead Sea Scrolls, if I'm not mistaken, one of the biggest problems was that back in the 1940s, the Bedouins, in order to maximize profit, they cut them into pieces and try to sell each piece separately, not realizing that they're, destroying the...
So cutting up things was a problem. But here we're talking about things that disintegrated naturally also. So they're sitting in this cave 2,000 years. So you had the large scrolls that were preserved pretty well, like in the Great Isaiah Scroll and Psalms and some other. But you have places where you have just thousands of little pieces. Now, so the bigger pieces people have been working on, piecing together. So to connect these two things, one of the things they discovered in the Cairo Genizah is called the Damascus document, which has to do perhaps sectarian rules of how a group that was living near the Dead Sea should behave. And then they found the same work, not the same text, not the same words exactly, but a lot of overlap. Another version of in Qumran, in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So you had both somehow preserved in the Genizah a unknown work. I mean, no one knew about it until it was found there. And people today are comparing them. So we have in many other places in the world, similar problems, same kind of things. You have millions of Arabic manuscripts.
And so
you have Sanskrit manuscripts, and these issues are...
Now, is there a network of scientists like yourselves that talk to each other about it, the Arabic manuscript, the Sanskrit? Are you talking to each other?
We definitely talk to each other. We read each other's papers, but we also talk to each other and share ideas. And
this is hugely important, and this is also an opportunity to thank the donor from Canada for helping you guys.
Dov Friedberg, yes, definitely, and
Mr. Friedberg. Thank you, Dr. Friedberg, on behalf of all of us. Wonderful. Listen, Professor Dershowitz, I could spend hours talking to you about this. This is also an area that I'm passionate about. But we have to wrap up. And I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to stop by and educating us about your tremendous work and your very impressive career and about your background, from Long Island to, the Cairo Genizah. Incredible journey. Hopefully we'll get to host you here again. Thank you.
With pleasure. And the bright future of AI and manuscript studies. Yes.
I think you helped us also diffuse some of the fears that we have about artificial intelligence.
Thank you.
From Tel Aviv to our audience back home, goodbye until our next episode.